Recently, I received something really cool in the mail, which was a big box full of copies of the Chinese magazine Board War Game. Yeah, the magazine is in Chinese. I can't really read it, but there are a lot of pictures of Chinese people playing board games, in particular playing war games. And that's good enough for me. That's already really heartwarming to know that there are war gamers there too. The war gamers are all over the place. This is really my first time to explore Chinese war games. Well, come to think of it, last year I played Growling Tigers, which was the French edition of a Chinese game. But other than that, this is my first approach to Chinese war games, and I have quite a bunch now at home, so in the next weeks or months I'll be playing them, alternating them with other games, of course. And so, well, you also will get to know a little more about the style of war games that my money is on the fact that you do not know it yet, or at least you do not know much about it. Now, the magazine comes with a board game. Each issue has a word game that comes with it, and the instructions in the magazine are indeed in Chinese, but there are available translations online. The counters are very easy to understand, even though they are in Chinese only. The game is perfectly playable. Many things on the map when it comes, for example, to tables and reference boxes are in Chinese and in English, so no problem there. The game is perfectly playable by people who do not speak Chinese, such as myself. Strike on Sarhu is the first game from Board War Game that I played, and it depicts a battle that involved the Ming forces in the early 17th century, a battle about which I really knew nothing. It is unfortunate that I cannot read the article that comes with the magazine, but of course you can always do some research online to know more about the battle. The map is printed on thick paper, kind of feels like plastified, semi-laminated, something like that. I think it would be resistant to damage. May not be the most attractive map that you've ever seen for a war game, especially because there are many nuances and the colors are a little drab, but the X's are large, and I know that that's a huge plus for many war gamers. Look how large, accommodating hexes are when you compare them to the size of a counter. So that by itself is something that, at least in my mind, makes up entirely for the somewhat unappealing visual aspect of the board. The counters, on the other hand, are really neat. They do look pretty good. I'm trying to figure out an angle to show them to you without the reflection from the light obscuring them. They look really nice. They are thick enough, not super thick, GMT type of thick, with nice illustrations and, well, and symbols that identify different types of units. There are different types of units, such as mounted archers, regular infantry. No, these are not regular infantry. These guys have little, whatchamacallem, little rifles. This is regular infantry. A type of unit that in the rules is called chariot. I think that maybe artillery is a better term for it. And then you have commanders, very important to activate your units. Units do not do much if they're not led by commanders. Movement factors are not printed on the counters, but they are printed here on the board. The regular artillery moves 4 movement points per activation, cavalry 7, artillery / chariots 3. What you see on the counters is the rating of the commander for the commanders and the combat factor for the combat units. The combat factor can be black, that means that that unit does not have range attacks, or it can be red, that means that range attacks are possible. Something that strikes me as odd, simply because I've never seen it before in a war game, is units of the two sides can share the same hex. Yes, you can end your movement in the same hex with your opponent, which is also why it is very important to have large hexes, such as these ones. The game has zones of control, but the zones of control are in the hex of the opponent only, not adjacent. That means when you enter an hex containing enemy units, then you have the standard effects that you have in zones of control, including the fact that you have to spend an extra movement point to enter there. That's something unusual. The game is divided in turns. Each turn the players will roll dice, will apply modifiers, and will receive action points. There are tracks to keep record of the action points that you spend, and then the players will spend action points to perform actions. That means that there is a lot of flexibility here. You can really do a lot of different things in different sequences. You can even activate the same commander multiple times in a turn with some restrictions, but I really like this. Somehow think of almost, I don't know, Infidel, Men of Iron without the randomness, or almost Conflict of Heroes in the recent incarnation. I go, you go, I spend a point, you spend a point. But I really like this, that you really have a lot of options when it comes to activating your units. You can activate a commander for movement, in which case the commander will move and the units that are stacked with the commander or adjacent to the commander will move too, spending movement points. You can choose to pass. You can choose to spend action points to rally, that is to remove disorganized markers. If you ever played a war game in your life, you probably know what that is. Of course, very important, you can spend action points to attack your opponent. And, well, there you have a good reminder of how a turn works. And you have several types of combats that are possible. For example, you have fire combat. To resolve fire combat, you will count the number of rifle units that you have involved. For the calculation, each rifle unit counts as a single rifle unit. I know that seems obvious, but it is not, because we need to specify that, because that doesn't apply to artillery units. Each artillery unit counts as two firing units for this calculation. So you take into account the number of units that are firing, you roll a die, you add or subtract one depending on the elevation, in case there is an elevation change in your attack, and if the result is 5 or more, then inflict a hit on the opponent. It works similarly if you're attacking with archers. Number of archers, die, possible modifier, but the standard number to hit is 6. You can charge the opponent. In that case, the way you resolve it is number of charging cavalry units, roll of die, possible modifiers, point modifier, and the number to hit is 5 or more. And actually, you also have melee, which is explained or summarized in this at a table here, which looks very scary, but there is no need to be scared. Simply, when you have melee between units that occupy the same hex, both players roll dice, they add the combat strength of the units involved, they add tactical modifiers, and you have a summary here. You compare the two total results, and that will tell you what happens then, and one of the two sides may have to take a retreat check. It looks scary, but really there's no reason to be scared. These are very basic wargaming ideas with some occasional twists here and there. So there are things that are extremely familiar and things that I've never seen, and the mix of the two is pretty exciting. The game continues for 5 turns. At the end of that, the victory is a certain, unless instant victory conditions have been achieved. And then, well, at that point, you see who the winner is. And victory is based on control of key hexes as well as an elimination of enemy units. Now, for a general assessment of the game. Is this a good game? I think it is. Strange flavor in a way. Very different. Yes, it does feel different. Everything feels familiar, and yet there are just ideas that are not usual. not often seen in war games. It is an extremely simple war game. This could be an introductory war game. The rules do a good, not excellent job in explaining the game. There were a couple of times in which I scratched my head a little bit in doubt, mainly because the translation didn't seem to be entirely clear, but the translation, the rules worked. It's entirely possible to play the game without any particular effort on your part, maybe just a little bit of interpretation here and there. The game plays well. Yes, it does. I mean, the mechanics are solid. The game is really solid. The few unusual things that I've seen here, such as on a control in the hex of the unit only, are welcome new twists on a familiar plot. For such a simple game, this is one that packs quite a punch. That definitely shines when it comes to the number of options that you have, and therefore the freedom that you have to simply budget your strengths and create your strategy around different expenditure of action points, which again you can spend to attack, to move, to pass, to reorganize units, a lot of different things. Simple game, good one. Definitely this was a good first dip into Chinese war games. I enjoyed playing this game. May not be my new favorite war game ever, but it is a pleasant game to play. Gave me a chance to learn about a battle that I knew absolutely nothing about. Gave me a chance to learn about a new style of war games, and definitely this is a style of war games that I will be exploring in the future. Strike on Sarhu 1619 by Board War Game.